We're talking today with John Yearwood of Georgetown, Texas, and the interviewer is Jane Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so John, let's begin at the beginning. Where and when were you born?
January 16th, 1945 in Stephenville, Texas.
Okay, and did you grow up in Texas?
I grew up in Stephenville and attended Tarleton State University, which was in Stephenville.
Okay, now what was your family doing for a living when you were growing up?
My dad was a rancher and had a feed store and a wool and mohair business, and my mother was a college professor teaching early childhood development and child psychology.
Okay.
And every time I would get in trouble, she would say, "What kind of, credibility do I have with a child like you?" So,
all right, so an interesting background there already. And when did you finish high school?
in 1963.
Okay, and what did you do after high school?
Well, I had an uncle who worked for Chicago Bridge and Iron, and the day after I graduated, I went to Collins, Mississippi, and became a union boilermaker. And since I didn't know anything, I swept out the oil storage tanks, and I cleaned, the mud off the iron going up, and I did all the jobs that didn't take anything except muscle.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you do that?
I did that. We moved from Collins, Mississippi to Kernersville, North Carolina, doing the same thing up there. And then my foreman called me in at the end of August and said I was fired. And I went, "Why? What did I do wrong?" He said, "You didn't do anything wrong. Your Uncle Jim called and said if you were making this much money, you wouldn't go to college, so he told me to fire you." So I got fired. I went back and enrolled in college.
Okay, where did you go to college?
Tarleton State University.
Tarleton, that's right, you said that.
Part of Texas A&M.
All right, and when you're at Texas A&M, so they do ROTC there, right?
Yeah, I got a ROTC scholarship.
Okay, and then now at a place like that, I mean, were you paying attention to what was going on in Vietnam? Because Vietnam was ramping up while you're there. Were you paying much attention to that?
Yeah, we were. We studied that. It was interesting, just naturally, about what was happening, and it seemed pretty obvious that I was majoring in Vietnam, being in ROTC and everything, and so we paid a lot of attention to it and talked about it and watched it on the news.
All right, and then when did you graduate from there?
Graduated in January of '68.
Okay, and then what did you do upon graduation?
I went to officer basic course, armor officer basic course at Fort Knox.
Okay, so armor officer, not infantry officer at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, Fort Knox, Kentucky. All right. Now, talk a little bit about the ROTC training. What do you actually learn while you're in ROTC?
Well, it's just basic, drill and maneuver and leadership, and we had logistics. Basically enough to make you a real unqualified second lieutenant. But no, it was a good program. It taught good leadership. I later worked on my master's, and I learned more in freshman ROTC than I did in getting a master's in personnel management.
Okay. All right. So you've gone through all of that, and then now you get to the Armor Basic course, and what happens there?
Well, it was a special 6-week course. I was a regular Army officer. The West Pointers and the top 10% of Army ROTC get regular Army officers. And in Steve Pullen's case, it's very, very odd for a OCS guy to get it, especially without a degree. But Steve was an exceptional guy.
Mm-hmm. And we have at least a limited interview with him. So he's also in our collection. If anyone's watching this, you can find him. Okay, so yeah, you're doing that, but it was still kind of odd, I mean, because most ROTC people become reserve officers, and reserve officers are managed a little bit differently, I guess. Did they have to do a longer course than you did, or are you all doing the same thing?
No, we all did the same thing.
Okay.
It was just the top 10% of ROTC graduates were distinguished military graduates, and they got the registered, I mean, the regular Army commissions.
Okay. Okay. So what are you actually doing in that school?
In ROTC?
Well, no. Once you're in. Fort Knox.
Basically, we learned how to be tankers. We were commissioned with an MOS at 1204, which is a tanker, and 1203, which is a cavalry officer. Mm-hmm. Reconnaissance. And we were trained in both, and it was a special RA class, regular Army officers class, so it was only 6 weeks, so it was a slam bam, thank you ma'am class.
Now, what kind of vehicles did you use?
Primarily the M60 A1 tank and 113s.
Okay.
And some training on the Sheridan reconnaissance vehicle or tank that only the 82nd Airborne had at that time.
Yeah, it's the one that's like made out of aluminum or something.
Yeah, later the 82nd had, Brother Woods had it. I think there were some cavalry units that had it, and they were also in Vietnam.
Yeah. All right. So at this point, the cavalry is still grounded at cavalry. It's not air cavalry.
In '68, yeah, they had air cavalry.
Yeah, but not what you were doing when you were.
No. We didn't study that at all.
Okay. All right. So you complete the 6-week course. And what comes next?
Okay, went to Betty for Ranger, and then went to Fort Hood, Texas, to the 1st of the 81st Armor.
Okay. Now, let's back up a little bit. Okay. You do Ranger training. What does that consist of?
Starving yourself. No, they starving you. Leadership. Pushing yourself as hard as you could go. Managing with very little food, very little sleep, adverse conditions. We carried the M14, not the M16. And someone asked a Ranger instructor why, and he said, because they're heavier. So, it's, it teaches you that you can just keep going. And there was a high attrition rate out of there, and a lot of injuries, and luckily that, I got through, and I got the tab, and I'm still proud of that.
All right. Now, did they do all of it at Fort Benning, or did they move you to different places?
No, they moved you. They had city phase, which was at Benning. Mm-hmm. Then they had the mountain phase, which went up to Dahlonega, Georgia, and then they went to the Florida Ranger Camp at Eglin.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you're getting different kinds of terrain that you're working in and doing field exercises and things in those places.
Yeah.
All right. How long was the Ranger School?
That's 2 months.
Okay.
Like 62 days or something like that.
Okay. So you got through that. Okay, and then okay. So now you could go out and join your unit. Okay, and so Fort Hood, Texas.
Yes.
Okay. And now what happens there?
The 1st Armored Division.
Yeah.
I was a tank platoon leader in 81st Armor, like I said, in Bravo Company, and got there. I had five M60A1 tanks, and a couple of deuce and a halves, and there were in the entire company. It's rather small. It was 81 people, mm-hmm. But got there. I got an assignment real quick to teach the entire division defensive driving, and I'm going, what? So I taught 16,000 people defensive driving, in this huge theater that do a couple of battalions at a time, and that, I guess Bill's character. I was the briefing officer for the M60A1 tank. Briefed President Nixon. Did good. I had a great platoon sergeant, Sergeant Frank Moore. And he intensively managed me. Mm-hmm. And I needed it.
Yeah.
I can remember I was there about 3 weeks, and he said, "Lieutenant Yearwood," he said, "I bet you want the best. I bet you want to have the best tank platoon in the 1st Armored Division." I said, "Oh yeah, Sergeant Moore, I do." He said, "If you just wouldn't talk as much and listen to me more, it'll help you." And I said, "Thank you very much, Sergeant Moore," because I knew at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the smart officers listen to the non-coms.
Yeah, he was a good guy, and he left and went to Vietnam. Almost immediately came back because he was wounded, and he was in Darnell Army Hospital there. So I went up and saw him in the hospital several times. But then I was made the company executive officer, and at that time, the battalion consisted of a lieutenant colonel, his battalion commander, John J. Salzberg. I thought he was a good guy. He was a tough guy. A first lieutenant who was the executive officer of the battalion in a major's position. A CW2 maintenance officer, and everybody else was second lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my company commander outranked me three weeks.
Yeah. So were the other officers in Vietnam? Or people who should have been filling your ranks?
Yeah, you very, very seldom saw a captain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it was just like, you didn't see one.
Okay.
But
so how long do you stay at Fort Hood?
I stayed there a year. I had put in for flight school, and my battalion commander kept telling me, "You're ruining your career." And it seemed like still a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. And my mother didn't want me to fly. My brother had been killed in the Air Force.
Okay.
Pilot in the Air Force, he'd been killed. And my dad was dead, and I was sole surviving son, but I thought military was the thing to do.
Okay.
And in fact, when I went down and registered for the draft when I was 18, you know, everybody knew everybody in Stephenville, Texas, and they knew the circumstances, you know, that I was sole surviving son. And I came back with a 4F, and I showed my mother, and she went, "4F? That's idiots and preachers,"
mm-hmm.
you know. So, but you know, I put in for flight school, went to Fort Walters, reported there in May of '69, and went to that training.
Okay. Now, first of all, what kind of flight school was this? What were you
Helicopter flight
Helicopter school. That's
yeah.
important. People don't always know that.
Primary helicopter school.
All right. And what kind of helicopters are you flying there?
I flew an OH-23.
Okay.
A Hiller OH-23. And
how big a helicopter was that? What kind of thing was it?
It looks like the Bell 47 or the OH-13, which was the MASH helicopter.
Right. So the one with around the bubble.
It was a bubble. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
In fact, I bought an OH-23 and have one now. So.
All right. You learn on that, and then so what are you actually learning there?
Well, just basically flight characteristics and how to physically handle and manipulate the controls.
And did you take to that pretty quickly?
I suppose so. I didn't really have any problem. I wasn't the first one in my class to solo, but I wasn't the last either.
Okay.
So,
right.
You know, and I felt comfortable in that helicopter.
All right. Now, were there people who had accidents and things?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
All right. And then after you complete that, now that's not the kind of helicopter you're going to fly in Vietnam.
No.
That's sort of a training helicopter at that point. So where do you go next?
Well, went to Hunter Army Airfield. most of the people went to Fort Rucker for their second base, but I went to Hunter Army Airfield. And I really don't know how I was chosen for that. But, you know, got there, did instrument training in a Bell 47, which was the helicopter in MASH. And then the rest of the training in Hueys, in UH-1 Hueys. And graduated from that, I guess, in April of 70.
Okay. Now, what's the difference between flying a Huey and flying the Hiller that you were flying originally?
Well, it's turbine engine. It's a lot bigger. You don't have to physically manipulate the RPM, you know, on that, because it's automatically, you know, the fuel control does that automatically, and it's just, you know, I really like. I mean, the Huey is still a good helicopter.
Okay. Now, did you train for different kinds of conditions? Did you do night flying? Or?
Yeah, did night flying. Did a lot of stuff like that. I had orders to Cobra School, and I broke my hand riding a dirt bike, and I was not held in good esteem because of that, because we'd been briefed, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to snow ski, you're not supposed to, you know, do this, you know, we've got to. In fact, when I got orders for flight school, the orders were for Vietnam with flight school en route.
Yeah.
So we wore USARV, United States Army USARV patches, because that's where we were assigned. And you know, I went in one Monday morning to the student office and went, you know, here's this, you know, my broken hand. He said, yeah, you can't fly. And I said, that's what the flight surgeon said. And so they weren't too happy with me. So he said, okay, well, we're going to work you. I said, I expect to be worked. And so they gave me a box of cards about like this. He said, put these in alphabetical order. And so I did that, and I took it back up very proudly, said, okay, they're in alphabetical order. And they went, okay, well, let's see. And I sat around for a little while. I said, why don't you go home? We'll figure out something for you to do tomorrow. Came back the next day, and they went, well, we don't really have anything for you to do here. Said just go home and come back tomorrow. I came back, did that, and they went, why don't you just call in every day? And then I called in a couple of days and said, just come back when your flight surgeon releases you. So that was 6 weeks, and I was drawing my $25 a day TDY, which was making me absolutely rich. And so I just drove all over the Southeast and had a good time.
All right. So now, did you eventually go to Cobra School, or did you?
No, they were mad at me.
Okay.
And so when I graduated, I just had a month off, I think, or some time off, I don't remember, and then went to Vietnam.
All right. So how did they get you to Vietnam?
Flew on, I think, a Flying Tiger 707 or DC-8.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And where did you fly out of?
Flew out of Travis.
Okay.
And flew into Saigon or Long Binh. And I can remember, you know, going into Long Binh and going, oh my gosh, you know, we're gonna take fire going. You know, everybody on there, you know, is going, not knowing what to expect. And I think it was the show Platoon, which showed the new guys coming in and the old guys going in. And we saw that, you know, all the fresh, innocent faces.
Yeah.
And then
Now, when you went out on that flight, were there mostly enlisted men on that, and guys younger than you?
Yeah. You know, I'd been to college and had a year in a unit and then a year in flight school, and so I was I was certainly older than most. And by that time I'd been promoted to captain. But of course, during that period of time, the only thing you had to do to get promoted to first lieutenant and captain is pay your club bill on time.
Right.
You know, I mean, it was pretty automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And, got over there, and my first unit of choice was the Cavalry Squadron in the 101st Airborne Division.
All right.
My second one was the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, but I got my first choice.
All right. So what's the specific unit you joined in? You joined the 101st.
I was assigned, got assigned to, went up to Division G1, and they said, okay, this is the unit that you're designated for. Do you have any? I think they asked me if I wanted to do anything else. I said no, and then I showed up to the S1 of the squadron, and they assigned me to Bravo Troop.
The Bravo Troop, and which squadron?
It's at 2nd and 17th Cav.
Okay, yeah. That's 2nd Squadron, 17th Cav. Okay.
And I, sitting there, I saw an R back, in Charlie Troop, and I said, "Is that Rusty back?" And it was a guy I'd been in the 1st Armored Division together and gone through flight school with him. And he said, "Yeah, but he's not expected to live. He was shot down the day or two before, and he's in 85th Evac Hospital." So I said, "I got to go see him." So I did get a Jeep and went over to see Rusty, and he was burned terribly. Mm-hmm. And, but he made it, and he and I went through advanced course together. He was pretty scarred up and everything, but he did make it.
All right.
And then the next day, I had this terrible toothache, and I'm going, I gotta go to the dentist, and I'm sure everybody's going, okay, he had to go see his friend. Now he's got to go to the dentist. This guy's a sham, and that's what I felt like. I went, oh no, I'm sorry this happened. And anyway, went to the dentist, and I just had some food impacted under a tooth, and they washed it out, and I was fine. But came back and then started training in the helicopter.
Okay. Now, where were you based at this point?
At Camp Eagle, Vietnam.
Okay. And where is that within South Vietnam?
Well, it's in Northern I Corps. It's northwest of Phu Bai and southwest of Hue. Mm-hmm. Right on the Perfume River there, and it's in the flatlands.
Right.
But you can see the mountains just right, just a few kilometers to the west.
Okay. So when did you actually get there? When did you join the unit?
Well, I went in and I went to Camp Evans first, and went to the CERTS, which is Screaming Eagle Replacement Training Center. Mm-hmm. And I was a captain and I was Ranger qualified, so they made me the commander of the little class.
Right.
And usually Ranger qualified people don't have to go through CERTS, mm-hmm. But I think since I was, anyway, they made me go through as the commander there. Mm-hmm. And so we spent, I don't know how long, a week or so at CERTS.
What were you actually doing?
Training, basically infantry training. We would go out in the field and do different operations, and I think we fired the M16 a few times, and it was basically infantry training.
All right. And then after that, now what do you do?
Well, I reported to Camp Eagle,
okay.
and then went through the process of going to the division, the squadron, and then the troop.
Right. And what kind of reception do you get when you join the troop?
Good. I mean, I was a FNG, and expected to be that, but there was a lot of support, a lot of, my roommate was Weird Alex Northrop. He'd been the scout platoon leader, and he was the ops officer then, and he had a Distinguished Service Cross, and he was quite a guy, and he said, okay, well, that's your bed over there. He said, I'll get all that stuff out from under there. There's much stuff under your bed, and I'll move it out. And in a little while he came in and he was moving these 60 millimeter mortars, you know, 1/4 pound blocks of C4, det cord. And he said, I make Kadoosh bombs out of these. You know, I'm going, he said, I'll teach you how to make a Kadoosh bomb. You can help me make them. You know, and I'm like, okay. You know, is this stuff going to blow up?
So what is a Kadoosh bomb?
A Kadoosh bomb is something that he made every day that we would fly down and drop it on a bridge at the north end of the A Shau Valley and blow the bridge up that they rebuilt every night. So, but that was Weird Alex's deal.
So what's the mission of the 2nd to the 17th and of your troop?
Find the enemy. We had 8 UH-1 helicopters, Huey helicopters, and a TO&E of 27-man reconnaissance unit, and they were supposed to be 11 deltas, which are scouts, but a lot of time they were infantry, 11 Bravo, because that was the job, you know. And then we had 10 scouts and 9 H-1s, Cobras, and it was a 183-man unit that had so much synergy. It was just great. You could give a air camp troop 3 cooks and they could go live on their own forever. You know, it needed more people and usually had more people. You know, when it went out by themselves like that, some maintenance and armament and things like that. But had everything. It was a great unit that the Army did away with. You know, they went from that to a 32-man air camp troop, which was, and I think a lot of that was to give command time to captains, because an air camp troop was supposed to be commanded by a major, and then the platoons were, you know, were commanded by captains, and in '86 they made the aviation a branch. Before that, for instance, armor controlled all my assignments. You know, armor branch or infantry, artillery, transportation, whatever. But they made aviation a branch, and I think that was a mistake, because as a ground guy, which I spent half my time as, I liked that. You know, and then you got with aviation, you knew exactly what you needed from the aviation. You knew exactly what the ground guy needed, and vice versa. When you're on the ground, you knew how to use that asset, you know, and what to request and what they could do and things like that. And I still think that was a mistake, making it a branch. But they got some high-speed, low-drag helicopters, you know, the D-model Chinook, the Apache, the Black Hawk, and they went, hey, you know, we should be on our own.
All right. So go back to Vietnam here. You join your unit. How quickly do you start flying?
Well, after I went and saw my buddy at the hospital, and after I went to the dentist, you know, basically the next day.
Okay.
You know, there was this guy named Adams, and he was a short timer, so he, you know, gave me an orientation flight, you know, got me familiar again with the helicopter, and then I took a check ride not too long after that, and then I was the platoon commander, but a 110-hour novice pilot. So I was co-pilot. Okay. And then we started flying missions.
Okay. Now describe what those missions are like. Particularly the first ones. When? Okay. So what time of year was it when you started flying there?
Yeah, in the end of May, 1st of June.
All right. So that's after the monsoon in that area. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's better weather. So now you fly out. What do you do and what happens?
Well, the typical mission, the A Shau Valley was the mainstay of Bravo Troops' area of operations. We had a Charlie troop. They were down south in the Rung Valley, primarily in the Elephant Valley. You know, we overlapped some. Then we had Alpha Troop up in Quang Tri, and they were, you know, along the DMZ and the Quezon Plain up there in the north end of the A Shau. We mixed up as needed, and we'd surge in one area, one troop's AO if they had a big fight, and you know, many times we went down to work for Charlie Troop when they'd have all their Hueys shot up, and I didn't mind that because Charlie Troop had great commanders. Right. Captain Sterrett.
You know, when you're flying into the A Shau, what is it like? What do you
okay,
see?
you fly out there with a pink or a heavy pink. You got a scout down low, an OH-6 down low, a Cobra or two covering them, you know, and a Huey as a chase ship, which sometimes acted as command and control, and always acted as if you got somebody shot down, he's going to go in and pick you up,
Right.
you know, and so you'd have that. A pink team was a scout and a gun. A heavy pink, you know, were two guns and a scout.
Okay. Now, what does the terrain look like when you're flying over? What do you see?
Well, it could be real hilly, you know, going out there. I mean, right after the Perfume River and right after, like I say, after Camp Eagle, you'd fly out and you'd start getting in the lower mountains, and then some of them were pretty high out right on the edge of the A Shau Valley. And then the valley was a great big flat valley, basically, and it was just absolute and totally no man's land. I mean, it was and the hills around it, both on the east side, you know, toward the ocean, and on the west toward Laos, were just, it was a target-rich environment almost every day. You'd take fire and return fire and engage and you know, call in spot reports back to Squadron, and then pass it on up to Division. You know, Division would you know, determine, you know, basically by a lot of the time by what we found, you know, where they would want to surge their ground units, their infantry battalions, and place their artillery on, you know, fire bases and things like that. But
now is Hamburger Hill still going on when you got there? Or
no, but Hamburger Hill was right, you know,
yeah,
right at the western edge of our AO there, you know, right before Laos.
Okay.
And,
now, was the valley floor essentially covered with jungle, or were there breaks in it?
It was both. A lot of it was burned off. A lot of it was high elephant grass. A lot of shot down airplanes, helicopters, airplanes also. A whole lot of bomb craters, you know, filled with water. I remember one time when I had the ground platoon, if we didn't have a lieutenant in there, I was Ranger qualified, so I'd go on the ground. And we were supposed to go into this LZ, I can't remember for what. It wasn't down to airplane recovery or anything, it was probably reconnaissance or something, and couldn't get in there. Scouts couldn't even get close, so we certainly couldn't. And our Charlie Troop had been working the valley, and they'd killed an NVA out there, and said there were some documents blowing around in this area. So they decided, since we were already airborne, okay, they're gonna put us on the ground, our air rocket platoon on the ground, and put us down in this high elephant grass. You couldn't see anything, and we didn't find, you know, had scouts, he couldn't find the dead guy, you know, couldn't find any documents or anything else. And the thing I remember about that is we had a Kit Carson Scout, which were captured NVAs, and they were supposed to help us out. Well, this guy, I know why he was captured, because he was dumb as a rock. I mean, and I don't have a map sheet of the sector code where we weren't supposed to go in. Of course, you couldn't see anyway because you're in elephant grass like that. And, you know, and he opened up rock and roll, full automatic magazine device, and you know, Tune Sergeant goes there, jerks a knot in his ass, and, you know, don't do that again. And then and again, he does it again. Well, you know, you can't hide when you're doing that. You know, we're scared stiff, you know, like 15, 16 guys on the floor of the A Shau, you know, and so I told Tune Sergeant, I said, Sergeant Griffin, go over there, take every magazine. You know, I don't want one in the chamber. Take every magazine away from him. You know, I don't even have a frag or anything because he's just going to do this again. But anyway, we got out of there without any contact or anything else. But the A Shau was infamous. You know, when the first Cav went in there in 69, I think. 68. 68. You know, I think they said the first 22 aircraft, you know, were shot down going in. And we had aircraft shot down there, taking fire there, you know, all the time.
Now, when you're flying with it, could you actually see any NVA in the ground, or were they always
Yeah.
cover?
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes they were actually out in the open or someplace where you could see it.
Well, you could see them a lot of the time. A lot of the time you could not see them. You know, you just take fire and, you know, okay, it was from left side, right side, you know, wherever, you know, but a lot of time you could see them, especially if you're going into an LZ and they're there, you know, and it's real scary. You know, I mean, if you're in a Huey and you're going slow, and I remember the first time I took fire, we'd slowed up, and I was a brand new Peter pilot, knew not much at all, and I heard the crew chief's door gun open up, and I looked around, and there were 3 dinks standing in the LZ basically, and he was shooting at them, and they were shooting at us, and we got shot up pretty good, and a couple of blues in the back were hit, and the guy named Norm Rand was flying, and he'd been there almost a full year. Real good guy. You know, you don't jerk an aircraft around when it's heavy and you're in a high altitude, high density altitude thing. He was very calmly doing this, and I'm going, he doesn't even know we're getting hit. And I thought I was scared. So I keyed the mic instead of the intercom. I said, "Norm, we're taking fire, damn it, we're taking fire." You know? And our troop commander is at 5,000 feet sucking oxygen. You know, now John, settle down. Well, you're not getting shot at, asshole. You know, but I think every time I took fire, I wasn't real calm. Some of the pilots we had this guy named Erickson, we called him Leaf Erickson. He was one of my pilots. And he didn't drink, he didn't raise Cain. Real good pilot, real conscientious. And went into this one LZ, and I was lead. We got shot up. I was wounded. Second one got shot up. Well, Leaf took around in the engine very calmly, you know, and he thought he had a live Ranger on a stable rig extracting it. Well, it was a dead Ranger, you know, but he didn't know that, and he climbed up enough, you know, dove down, and he was kind of a narrative. Okay, well, I'm losing power. I've got to go in. I've got to get down here, and dove down the mountain into this little river valley and everything. Flared. I didn't see this because I couldn't see at the time, but he flared, you know, let the Ranger down easy like that, picked up enough speed where he could all rotate and put it down in the thing. I mean, calm. You know, I heard over the radio the whole thing, and it was just as calm as it could be. Well, I was never calm. I screamed. hollered every time I got shot. But then we got the mission to go back in there and get this aircraft. And, you know, like 6 weeks it sat there. And you know, oh, it's gonna be booby trapped. They're gonna have, it's just gonna be absolute horrible, you know, thing going in there. And it was a scary day. And I didn't go in, I was flying then. But went in there, the door guns were still on there, the ammunition was in there. The first aid, apparently it was hidden enough that the digs didn't know it was there. You know, and the extraction of the helicopter went just fine. The Blues didn't come in, get in contact. The aircraft didn't take any fire. But you know, as far as ripcord goes, now I didn't see this, but there were reports of a Huey getting shot down, and it had packs on board. And it killed everybody on board. And the NVA laid out all the bodies like this. And they said that was on the southeast side, you know, down away from Ripcord. I don't know, have you heard that story?
No.
You know, I gotta talk to guys and see if they remember that. But
now, did you fly out to or around Ripcord yourself?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, we were out there almost every day. I mean, Colonel Molinelli, our squadron commander, who I loved. You know, he tried to kill me many, many times, but I mean, he was a great commander. And he said, you know, they've got things going on constantly up there. They're under battle. When you get out there, just call them and say, hey, you're on. You give them your call sign. I'm on station. You need me? Give me a call. And you'd call in. And I think one day we went out there, and their call sign was Astro 32, and you could see the mortars or artillery impacting on the fire base, and everything. And you know, so Astro 32, Banshee 46. We got a heavy pink team out here working for you in the west, you know, or something like that. And Astro 32, right. You know, and then in a minute, the voice who was Astro 32 changed. I'm going, wonder if he got killed, you know, like that, because, well, you know, Andre Lucas got killed right outside the talk, I think, by an order. So, but the day of the extraction, we were on strip alert, and I was flying, and had Steve Pullen as the blue platoon leader, and had the Blues, and we were sitting on Birmingham on strip alert to go recover downed airplanes. And I remember I got Steve, and I said that we could hear the fight going on. And I said, let's just go take a look. So we took off and just kind of flew out toward that area and saw the helicopters going in and out, and you know, all the impacts and the smoke and explosions. And, I mean, that was, you know more about it than I do, but it was a fight.
Yeah. Now, did you ever land on Ripcord earlier on?
No.
Okay.
No. We had a scary story. A scary thing that happened was Steve and I would kind of flip around, and he would be on the ground for a while with the blue platoon, and then sometimes I would be, and I don't know if he was there, but they said they heard some FM radio traffic. The signal battalion, or I don't know, somebody had this aircraft called Quick Fix, and they would fly around and get an azimuth to a radio, like from here. Then they get another one, then they'd get another one, so they could intercept it. Well, this FM radio was on and off, no transmission, no talking, and they said it's on Ripcord. And then they said they saw a body bag on Ripcord. And they went, okay, well, we're gonna put the blue platoon in there to check this out. Oh, by the way, the Air Force has dropped persistent CS, tear gas on it.
So this was after Ripcord was
This was
evacuated?
after Ripcord was evacuated. I don't know, 3 or 4 days or something. I don't remember. And nobody wanted to go back in there. And they started looking for gas masks. You got to have the aviators gas masks. You got to have 4 per helicopter, and every blue's got to have a gas mask. And they found the gas masks, but none of them had filters in them. And it's like, well, and thank goodness they canceled that mission. But
Now, was your group involved in going in after the battle to take, there were some bodies near Hill 605 where a company had done it, and General Harrison had taken, he got somebody to go out with him, but you don't, to do a body extraction sometime after the end of Ripcord, but that's
I don't
not in your base.
I don't
Okay.
recall that.
Yeah, so I think it was a cavalry unit of some kind that he got to do that, but I don't remember which one it was. Anyway.
We briefed General Harrison on our capability to
Yeah.
go get down to aircraft and things like that. Steve and I went up to Camp Evans and briefed him on that. In fact, I went to his funeral up at Fort Hood.
Okay. All right. So you had mentioned earlier there was a certain point when your helicopter got hit and you got wounded. Can you describe what happened then?
I was lead helicopter, and there was a Ranger team in contact, and they had a lot of wounded, and that was out near Rocksaw, and I was lead helicopter. Went in there. I can remember looking down and seeing these NVA, and also at the same time they were close enough. And the Ranger team, we were just over the Ranger team, and the NVA looked like they were 20 yards away. I mean something like that. And then we got hit, and I got plexiglass and some aluminum fragments in my eyes. And thank goodness it was a dark, dreary day. And I had my visor down and my sunglasses on. And I think that kept me from getting, but this stuff came up under my visors and got in my eyes. And I didn't know this until later, and the people in the squadron talk, said, he saw me and said, I thought you were blind. And I said, why? And I said, because you made a call, I can't see anything. But I had this first lieutenant with me who nobody wanted to fly with. And I got stuck with him, and he wouldn't take the controls. And my crew chief, who had been shot through the foot, was laying back, telling me, forward cyclic, reduce collective, okay, let's go. And he said, we've got a rope out, so we're allowed to be dragging it through the trees. And the crew chief was hit in the foot. The door gunner was hit in the heel. And I think Lieutenant Smith of the Rangers, who was belly man, had a slight wound in his leg. The only guy on board that wasn't hit was the co-pilot, who was so shook he wouldn't take the controls.
So did you get some level of sight back?
Yes, and I got my sight back pretty quick. It came back hazy, and then I could see that, but I blinked and I got it back where I could fly all right. Okay. And I flew us back to 85th and back. And that was the second time my crew chief, Steve Carper, great guy, had been hit. First time he was hit with me, he got shot through both legs and the scrotum. It didn't touch his testicles. But that wasn't bad enough to send him home. He came back to the unit and he kept going, I want to fly. And I said, you're walking on a cane, you can't fly. And then we were short people one day and got important mission, so he flew with me. And first time out again, he got shot in the foot, and that did a lot of bone damage. That set him back. But I visited with him several times.
Okay.
He lived in San Diego, and he came to the ranch a couple of times, and I saw him, and he went to a VHPA meeting with us one time in DC, but he died.
All right. So as the year goes on, the seasons change. So were you flying through monsoon season?
Yeah, a lot of times. I mean, you'd go a week without flying, and then sometimes you'd go do had to go do a weather check to see if you could get to the AO, because a lot of times it'd clear in the lowlands where we were, and going, you can't do that.
Could you fly through clouds or fog, or what were your limits for what you could do?
No, they taught you, coming out of flight school, you got a tactical instrument ticket, which meant you knew enough to know that if you got in the cloud, you were going to kill yourself. If you get in the cloud, you're going to die, basically. A story about that is, right after I got to Vietnam, I was still a co-pilot, and I was flying with Mr. Callahan, who was a great guy. He was a brave, good guy. And we were working for Charlie Troop trying to extract a Ranger team that had a couple of wounded. And it was just, we were just in and out of clouds, in and out of stuff. And he got vertigo so bad. He was diving at 120 miles or 120 knots, and I'm going, this isn't good, but I'm a brand new guy. And finally I went, I got the controls, and he went, thank God. And I went, if he's glad I'm flying, we're in trouble. Oh no. And he was sitting over there still with vertigo like this, and this guy, John Barron from Charlie Troop, a Cobra pilot, good guy. I couldn't find the extraction point where the Rangers were.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know where it is. So he'd get in front of him and he'd go over and mark. Well, I couldn't find it. A couple of times we went around before I saw it. And so went in there, and it was a log. It was real steep on the side of a mountain, cleared, and it was a log LZ, a log landing pad there. And I got up on there, and I didn't get all the way up. And I reduced collective, and I fell off the back. I'm a brand new guy. And so you can over torque an aircraft. And I hit the stops on the thing. I over torqued it the max you could over torque it. And then got control, went up, light on the skids on this thing, got all the Rangers on board, and a frag or a mortar or something hit right in front of us. Well, I over torqued it the max you could over torque it again. And I roped the thing up that way. About 3 o'clock in the morning, the old captain maintenance officer comes, wakes me up and said, what does this mean? You over torqued it to the max you could over torque it, and you didn't? I said, I wasn't looking at the torque gauge. I said, I'm just glad that we're all not dead, here. and he went, oh God. But anyway, we got out of that. I'm sure he had to maybe do a super duper inspection on the transmission and everything.
Okay, so we're talking about you're going to be in non-service, and kind of you're there. You arrive in May of 1970, and you're flying over the A Shau Valley. And you kind of do that for much of your time there. That's where your troop is normally assigned. But then, toward the end of your tour in 1971, there's a major operation called Lam Son 719, where the Argons, the South Vietnamese army, was actually invading Laos, and 101st Airborne, including its various aviation assets, were supporting that. Now, what were you doing during that time?
Well, during that time, Terry Atkinson, the scout platoon leader, and I were moved to Squadron headquarters. You know, for the tactical to work in operations there in the tactical operations center, and we were wondering what's up, and so I was up there, you know, one day, and you know, about noon, and everybody had left, and this courier came in with this envelope, and he said, "Here, I got something from division." And so I took it, opened it up. It's top secret. Well, I got a top secret clearance at that time, you know. It said the rules for, you know, of engagement for the invasion of Laos. And I went, oh hell! And I put it back in there, and I'm going, I can't even tell anybody this because I wasn't supposed to see it. But then, you know, every Vietnamese in Northern I Corps knew about it because they told the South Vietnamese, and they knew about it, and consequently they moved in 20 battalions of anti-aircraft down on the way to Chapone. And but anyway, we went up there as the operations with Colonel Molinelli, Major Mason, the S3, and then the squadron had to keep running. We had Charlie Troop up there with us a lot of the time, and they worked out of Quang Tri. The squadron had 2 aircraft troops from down south, Charlie 3rd and 17th, I think, and then Fox 1st the 8th, up there, outcon to us, up there, and so we had 3 aircraft troops most of the time, you know, working reconnaissance and everything, and then Bravo Troop would come up occasionally, and they still had their mission down south, which basically all the emphasis on Laos up there on Lam Son, just let the NVA move into the A Shau. But we got up there before it started. Went up there before it started. Had this lieutenant, the 2nd lieutenant, infantry, had gotten in trouble. I don't know if I ever knew why. Gotten in trouble, and he was pulled out of the infantry and given to Terry Atkinson, Captain Atkinson, and me as a helper. Well, he was from New York City, and I swear he was a mafia guy. You know, because he was a wheeler dealer. He said, "Hey, we're going to take all this, you know, we got aircraft. We're going to take all the cokes and beer and cigarettes and everything out there. We can get whatever we need, you know." And he was basically the supply guy for us. I mean, and we got up there, and you know, they were digging tactical. You had some engineers. They were digging tactical operations centers and doing all this important stuff. Well, here comes this backhoe over with Lieutenant Gill, and he said, "For 2 6-packs of beer," you know, and they dug us a hole, and then here comes this truck with all these sandbags and this PSP and this L-shaped entrance, concrete, I mean tin entrance and everything. So we had a heck of a bunker there because of Lieutenant Gill. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was I still don't know the story behind that, but he was a good
Scrounger?
Yeah, Scrounger, and so he and Terry Atkins and I lived in that hole, and we worked operations most of the time.
Were you at the Quezon Combat Base area?
Yes, for 2.5 months we lived there, and I got to go back to Quang Tri once to take a shower. We had very limited water. We weren't really supposed to do anything with it except drink it. But we'd sneak out at night to the water buffalo and wash our face off and everything. And then one time it got so bad that we just got a bunch of people together and went. There was on the east side of the Quezon Plain there was this waterfall, and we got under the waterfall and took a nice refreshing shower. And I can remember when I walked under the waterfall, I thought I'd been shot in the head because the red dirt that ran out of my head was literally just a red veil in front of me, you know. But that was nice. And
Were you able to keep track of what was happening with the operation itself?
oh yeah, we ran much of it. We ran much of it. We had these two troops from down south that weren't used to the anti-aircraft and the fire and the conditions that there were up there. And first few days they just got decimated. I mean, the scout platoon leader, Tim Hines, who later I went to advanced course with, and then he got in the Texas National Guard, and I was in the Texas National Guard when I transferred over there. His scout platoon, I mean, you know, he'd go out there, and I think he lost 3 observers in just a very short period of time in 086. And his platoon sergeant says, you know, his observers are going, I don't think this is a good idea. And the platoon sergeant said, hey, I'll go. And he came back dead. And then after, I mean, using scouts in Laos, I don't think it lasted a week, no more than 2 weeks, because there was no need to find the enemy. They found you. Just follow the tracers back. And you know, before we used to make fun of the lift outfits, the Huey battalions, you know, call them ash and trash and everything else. But we'd see them go in, you know, to these things, and the first 3 chalks, you know, chalk 1's going down, chalk 2's smoking, chalk 3's this. Well, here goes chalk 4.
Was this a period when the North Vietnamese had anti-aircraft missiles? Did they have? Because there was a variety of missiles they started using at some point, a handheld kind of thing.
They had, you know, the big missile, the SA-2. You know, we saw one of those shot one day. I mean, they wouldn't waste those on a helicopter.
Yeah.
I mean, it went through a cloud layer.
Right.
That's where we saw it.
Mm-hmm.
But they had every imaginable thing. I don't know how many anti-aircraft battalions they had set up there, because I mean they had planned. I mean it was a rat shoot for them, you know, and the fire bases out there were screaming for resupply. You know, there was you know. What was it? I read 444 combat lost helicopters.
Something like that.
In
It's a
Lam
huge
Son.
number, yeah.
You know, I mean, it was every day there were, you know, a bunch of them go down and not come back and everything else. One of the interesting things that happened, there wasn't supposed to be any Americans on the ground. The way the air cav troops set up, you get one of your airplanes shot down, the air rifle platoon goes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was supposed to be the hawk bow that we were taking out to go. Charlie 717th, you know, the first Americans on the ground over there were their blue platoon. They got a scout shot down, and they launched their blue platoon, put it on the ground. We were going, everybody, let's just forget this happened. You know, I don't know if anybody ever found that out, but there were 15 or 20 men were some of the first people into Laos.
Now, who were the Hawkbow?
The Hawkbow was a 330-man 1st Airborne Division reconnaissance company. I mean, a real good, gung-ho, high disciplined outfit. Hawkbow was Black Panther. Mm-hmm. And Daiwi Duan was their company commander. And he spoke fluent English. Their XO, Chung Wei, I got a picture of him. I can't remember his name. He and I were pretty good friends. But it was a real good unit, and they were the ones that were supposed to go, you know, recover mm-hmm. crews and things like that. It turned out to be, you know, obviously you killed a lot of enemy. Mm-hmm. The same thing at Ripcord. What was the estimated enemy?
I don't know, but
killed?
It would have been in the thousands.
No, just absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but what, you know, one American worth 1,000. One American dead American worth 1,000 dead enemy. I don't know. Maybe not.
Of course, the Arvin lost a lot in Lam Son, so that was.
Oh yeah.
That was expensive for them to wreck a lot of their best units.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that all was on. Now, if you think over the year's tour that you had in Vietnam, are there other particular events or memories or things that kind of stand out for you?
Well, like I say, during the, you know, just our regular operations in and around the I-Corps, one time we got kind of a tragic but humorous story. We were working the Quezon plane up for the Alpha Troops AO, and got weathered out there and had to fly down by Tiger Mountain. It was terrible, you know. If we'd learned how to fly instruments, we could have just done that, but we didn't know how. So we came back down and tried to come out you know, go through the A Shau and come back on the Q09 there. And we were taking fire big time from both sides because we were having a low level down there by Tiger Mountain or north of there. And we had this guy that had re-enlisted. He was one of McNamara's 100,000. And he had re-enlisted, you know, to be a door gunner. He never figured out how to clean an M60 machine gun. But he was sitting back on the right side of my aircraft. And the crew chief was, we were taking fire from both sides, and the crew chief was working it out. And I looked back, and here's this guy from New York City, I won't say his name, sitting on his hands. And I went, Shapiro, shoot. And he keys his mic and said, sir, my hands are cold.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that was his priority. So much for McNamara's 100,000. Mm-hmm. But there were one time when I was really proud to be an American. There was a maintenance aircraft during Lam Son taking a maintenance crew out to rig an aircraft. His call sign was Witch Doctor 9 or 7. And we were heavily involved in this operation. He got shot down, and he went into an A-frame bunker. And the Vietnamese, NVA had really built this thing good. You know, they took their, you know, most door guns carried 1,500 rounds each of ammunition, and they got shot down, landed near this A-frame bunker. You know, had 2 or 3 guys on there to rig aircraft, plus the 4 crew members. They all had M16s, I think. Took their M60s, and they were held up in this bunker for 2 or 3 days. And they could talk to us on, I think, the PRC-10 survival radios. I'm not sure how that was going, but the King, the Air Force Search and Rescue, Jolly Green, you know, with a minigun on both sides, on the rear ramp, and A-1E Sky Raiders on each side doing, you know, keeping that. You say King, they can do everything, right? Well, King got shot out of there 3 times. They turned to the cab and said, y'all do it. And Major Mason, I mean, you know, who wants to go start your briefing with King got shot out of there, but we're going to go do it, you know? And Major Mason said, Yearwood, you go do it. You know, I said, sir, you ought to brief this thing. It's important. He said, I'm not telling these people that. I'm making you do it. You know, and I'm going, oh no. So I go out there and I got all these shiny young guys, and they're, you know, almost up 19, 20 years old. And I brief them, I tell them King got shot of that 3 times, and we're gonna do this, and hey, we got Charlie Model gunships, we got Cobras, we're gonna do, you know, daisy chains on both sides. We're going to do all this stuff. And I can remember this W2, and he looked like a California surfer boy. He said, wait a minute, sir, King got shot out of there, and 3 times, and you want us to go do it? And I went, that's our mission. And they saddled up and did it. It went well. We lost one door gunner killed, and that was all. Put the hot guy in, got the 7 people out, got the witch doctor and his crew out and everything. But you just gotta love that. That was a proud moment to be an American.
That's the kind of thing that you see in Vietnam at times, and you kind of forget everything else, and it's what you do for each other, and that's one of the things that stands out about this. And it's something that we lose track of sometimes when we think about Vietnam and all the stuff people assume about it. I mean, they were every bit as devoted to their fellow soldiers as people were in other times. But yeah, and you got through, and you only lost 1 out of all that.
Yeah, I mean, it was they went okay, and they'd seen this was toward the end of Lam Son. They'd seen what was happening. They knew their chances weren't good, and they did it. And kind of a follow on to this, we were up at Fort Leavenworth doing a computer exercise up there, And we're sitting at the club, and the S3 comes over and says, "Hey, I was actually on the Cavalry Squadron." And the S3 comes over, says, "You ought to go up and talk to this guy at the bar here." He said, looking at his awards and everything else, y'all might have something in common. So I went up there and started talking to the guy and everything, and then the thing of Lam Son came up, and I said, "Yeah, one thing that happened there is the recovery of witch doctor, And I started talking to him and everything, and he said, "Yeah, I was involved in that." And I said, "Really? Who were you with?" And he said, "I was a witch doctor now." That was him.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was getting out. He was a W4, and he was getting out on a medical. He was there. But he had his Class A's on for some reason, but that was a coincidence.
All right. So you spend your year in Vietnam, and then what do you do next?
Well, I was real good friends with my PMS, my Professor of Military Science, at my college, and he was the Chief of Staff of the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. And I said that would be a cool assignment, going to the 3/4 Cav in Hawaii. And so contacted him and got an inter-theater transfer from Vietnam to the 25th Infantry Division and 3/4 Cav. Then Colonel Molinelli, during that period of time, Project Masters was going on, and the Air Cav Combat Brigade and everything else at Fort Hood. And Colonel Molinelli was going back to Fort Hood to do some stuff. And so he called in several captains and said, "You guys are going back. You're going to go with me to Fort Hood, and we're going to develop tactics for Air Cav and the Air Cav Combat Brigade and things like this." And I went, "Sir, you don't understand." He said, "I've already got an inter-theater transfer to the 3/4 Cav." And he went, "Captain, you don't understand. You're going to Fort Hood." And I went, "Well, I guess my stay in the Tropic Lightning Division wasn't very long."
Wow.
And so I went back and went to Fort Hood, and there were so many captains, and I was supposed to go to the 1st and 9th Cav. The 1st and 9th was the Cav Squadron in the 1st Cavalry Division. Great outfit, great history, killed a lot of dicks. I mean, just a good outfit like the 2nd and 17th, and supposed to go there. And then I was talking to the G1. I said, "Okay, well, what position am I going to go in?" And he said, "Well, there's a lot of captains down there." I said, I don't mind being a platoon commander again, And he went, "Well, I think you'll have to be assistant." Going, "Assistant platoon commander? How many captains you got there?" He said, "One platoon's got 26. And I'm going, "I don't want to do that. I want a real job." He went, "We got too many people here. We got too many commissioned officers, And I'm going, don't you have anything, that I can be, or have a real job?" And he was looking, he said, "Okay, the 1st Brigade, the Armor Brigade, has the aviation section, and their guys, due to rotate soon." I said, "I'll take it." So I got down there, and as soon as I got there, they pulled him out early and put me in that. So I was the aviation section commander of the Armor Brigade, which was a real good job. I worked for the S3, but I was also the CNC pilot, basically, in the 58, for the brigade commander, which I liked, I mean, we had 5 FM radios in the 58, you know, and a lot of time, you know, I thought that was a good job. That was a good job. It had two really good brigade commanders, Colonel Faith and Colonel DeLoach. And Colonel DeLoach had commanded the 2nd and the 17th much earlier. So he and I had a lot in common there. And I'd gone to college with his nephew, Nick Church. But you know, that worked out good. And then I got assigned to the 1st and 13th Tank, and went down there as an assistant S3, and soon got a company, and we changed over to 1st and 7th Cav. Had Colonel John K. Boardman, you know, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, hard man, but a great commander. I mean, you know, he'd make you shoot, move, and communicate. I remember when I first took over my company, you know, he drove by in his tank, and he said, "Follow me. Get in your tank and follow me." And he took off through doing this, and I knew what he was going to do because everybody warned me. You know, he's going to stop and then ask you where you were. Well, you're bouncing around in the cupola, and he's going, you know, he's busting brush and doing all this stuff, and you're dodging limbs and everything, and then he stops, you know, and you know, he said, come up my tank. So I came up there, and he'd gotten out, and he handed me a map and said, "Where are you?" And I went, "Right there." And then he had this, reached out and got a blade of grass, and he said, "Here, where are you?" So I had to point with the blade of grass. He was tough. I went to him one time with some terrible personnel problem, and I told him about it, and he said, "Captain, you want me to run your troop for you? You go make that decision." Well, he didn't have an answer either, but he gave me the good answer. Mm-hmm. A good guy, hard guy. I mean, I remember sitting in a command staff meeting one time, and one of the, I think assistant S3A or something, I can't remember. Colonel Boardman called, turned to him and said, "Are you having an affair with Captain so-and-so's wife?" And the guy stood there. "Yes, sir." He said, "Get out of my squadron. If you cheat on your wife, you'll cheat on your commander. Out." We never saw him again. But he was good. Then we got another Colonel Rydell. He was tough to replace him, but he was a good, fair guy, and I don't think we gave him a chance because we just loved Boardman so much. But he was a good commander. Then went to advanced course, and we'd been working. We were working Project Masters there. We did the first laser test on the tank. We'd have to wear these laser goggles, and we'd do all this stuff, and we'd fight the 2nd Armored Division all the time. And it was a battle. I mean, it was, you'd capture people and tie them up and bring them back as hostages. And Tom Wheelock, he was in Vietnam. He was in our grounds troop, you know, and he was with the guy Fitzmaurice, who got the Medal of Honor that night at Quezon. Anyway, he had Charlie Troop, and he captured an entire brigade staff, tied them up, put them in the back of a 113, and drove them back, including the colonel, an 06 colonel, tied up on the floor. Well, we got further orders after that. That didn't go too well. But I mean, fighting the 2nd Army Division, it was almost real. I can remember Fred Wilson. I was troop commander, and we were on the south side of the Cowhouse Creek, and so his Jeep was sitting over there with all the radios I had to tune on. So I just got on my radio and started going through the channels, and I got to this thing where I went, "That's the 2nd lieutenant. Let me see if I can figure out where he is." And he was talking, and I figured out, okay, he's in the 2nd Army Division. I said, I kind of got an idea of where he should be. And so I came up and I went, whatever his call sign was, Whiskey 1-2, Whiskey 1-2, Alpha 9 7, like I was in a helicopter. He said, Whiskey 1-2. He said, Roger, cack up your location. You're higher, which would be a brigade commander. You're higher, wants to come in your location. And so he cacked something up, and I said, that's not a good cack, give me a better grip. And he did it again. I'm sure, he was calling his platoon sergeant, how do you work this damn cack wheel? But anyway, I said, you're higher is getting impatient. Give me your location in the clear. And he said, I can't do that. I said, okay, I'll tell him. He went, okay, wait a minute. Papa Juliet 872-978, and we had Davardi on each side. The Davardi aircraft, OH-6s, you could call in a fire mission, and they would go to that grid and drop red smoke. So I just smoked the hell out of that lieutenant. And then I came back in a little bit and I went, Alpha 2 first 3, whatever it was. I said, did you learn something? I'm the enemy, and you just told me how to kill your platoon. Did you learn something, Lieutenant? Yes, sir.
Okay, and just for reference, when you said Davardi, isn't it? Division, so Davardi is divisional artillery?
Yeah.
So had it been a real war, you would have called artillery fire down onto them.
Yeah. But I mean, we worked, I can remember I had one Sunday morning, we worked weeks and weeks straight, every day, 7 days a week. And one Sunday morning, my wife asked me about 6:30 in the morning, she said, you know how long it's been since you've seen your little girl awake?
Mm-hmm.
How long? 6 weeks. We got great training. I mean, we were ready for combat. We were high speed, low drag, but you paid the price. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, after that, turned over my company. I was a Squadron S2 for a while, intelligence officer. It was just it was a holding place where I went to officer academy. Armor officer advanced school.
Now, is the advanced school what you get to make the transition to major? Was that?
Yeah. It basically, I mean, most of the people at that point in their career had already had a command, and done a lot of stuff. In fact, an interesting story was, I told you that my company commander outranked me about 3 weeks. Well, he made me call him sir all the time, which that's fine. He was company commander and I was the executive officer, but my wife and I had 2 cars. He had 1 car. He wanted my wife to come pick up his wife and take her around. Okay, we did that. I mean, he rubbed it in. I every time I saw him, I had to salute. I mean, he did that. And then when we got to advanced course, to get a leadership position, you had to check off all these blocks as far as a command and this and that, and he was missing something. And I was a platoon leader, and all that is a glorified roll taker. And I'd given that to somebody else. So you know, I just stood out in front every morning and told the class company commander, all present or one missing or whatever else. That was my full job. Well, his wife came to see my wife and me, you know, and going, you know, Bob was John's company commander, and now John's his platoon leader. This is causing a problem. And I'm going, what petty shit this is. And my wife's going, you know, you poor people, you poor people. But anyway, that was an interesting story.
All right. So when do you do the advanced course?
Well, we studied tactics, new equipment. General Starry, Don Starry was the commandant there at Fort Knox, and he had been the commander of 11th ACR, and he was highly decorated, highly thought of, good general. You know, so it was good training.
Okay. And when did you do that?
Let's see. Went to that in, I think, 74.
Okay.
You know, came out of it in 74. And then got out of there. I got orders to go to Texas A&M and work on my master's and teach ROTC. And so I screamed and hollered at Branch, I got to go be with troops. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to be with troops. That's what I was in the Army for. And then they said, okay, well, you got something else. Go to the Pentagon and we're going in R&D assignment. I said, I can't spell R&D. You know, I want to go to the 82nd. You know, because they got the money. You know, we can train them. So they said, okay, you're ruining your career. You know, you can go to the 82nd. Went to 82nd.
So the 82nd Airborne Division.
Yeah, 82nd Airborne. Got assigned to as an executive officer of an air cab troop, Delta Troop, 1st to 17th Cab, and that was great training. Had a couple of commanders. You know, they always gave me a lot of leeway doing stuff, and I enjoyed that. Then I got moved from there to the S3, which was a major slot, Squadron, you know, S3, and I was having marital problems. And I thought, well, you know, I'm gonna get out trying to save this marriage. And the squadron commander, you know, didn't want me to get out. He said, nah, you know, you can work that out. You need to stay in the Army. You got a good future and everything. I said, you know, and I said, nah. And he called Colonel Molinelli, my squadron commander in Vietnam. And Molinelli was going back to Hood. And so Molinelli called me and he said, hey, you stay in. I'll move you to Hood and I'll give you command of an air cab troop. I mean, that's the ultimate carrot. Oh my God, doesn't get any better than that. And you know, it was just, you know, sir, thank you very much. You know, I'm pretty well committed because I was trying to save a marriage. It didn't work. You know, I got out and decided I wanted to do something on my own. My father-in-law was a big executive with Ashland Oil. He said, "Hey, I'll get you a good job with Ashland Oil and everything." I said, "You know, wearing a suit every day, you know, I don't think so." And then a friend of mine had gotten out, had gone to Charlotte, and started flying freight in a Cherokee 6, single engine Cherokee 6, for $30 a day. So I flew up there in an OH-58, interviewed on the ramp with this guy to get me a job flying freight for $30 a day. And so I got out, showed up there, and he went, "You know, I really can't afford to hire you." And I'd had some terminal leave, you know, a couple months terminal leave, they're still paying for me. And I I'll fly free. He went, okay. So, you know, I got this check ride, which consisted of me taking off from Charlotte. I mean, I didn't know it. I didn't know how to fly fixture. Here I am again. It's almost like being a Peter pilot in Vietnam. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'd flown a couple of times with the other guys and around and everything else. I've got less than 100 hours of fixed wing time. And flying air freight, I mean, it's got to be there. I mean, you know, you got all these envelopes and packages and factories down for this, that, and the other part and everything else. I mean, it's got to go. And anyway, the owner was the check airman for the company, and so we took off from Charlotte. He crawled in the back, went to sleep. I landed in Florence, and he went, "Okay, here, you're checked out." And so I flew for him for a little while, and I said, if this bozo can do it, I can do it. And so I never got paid. So we'd go out and sit and wait for the freight to be picked up and then fly it back to Charlotte. And so I'd sit there, and I bought me a book out of Trader Plate, How to Start a 135 Freight Airline. And so I just went through this little old, I mean, it was printed on this crappy paper like you use in the first grade, you know, thick stuff like that. But I mean, it was accurate, and I sat down there and wrote a manual out. And my girls would sometimes come up during the, you know, on the weekend, and I'd take them to church. And when I got through with what I thought was a pretty good manual and tried to do everything I needed to do to start that, I went into the FAA office, and there's this guy, Mr. Smith, sitting there who I'd met in church. So hey, I know you, come in here. We're gonna change this, we're gonna do this. So he helped me do that. So I started, I'd given everything to my wife. At that point, the marriage had fallen apart because I didn't take the astronaut job. And he was a World War II pilot. He said, you know, I flew in World War II. I didn't have to come back and fly. You know, you got something else to do. And but anyway, this guy knew, you know, I didn't have any money, you know, and because I'd given everything to my wife, and I could have called my mother and asked her for some. But this guy said, down in Whiteville, North Carolina, I know this banker down there. Said he'd probably help you out. And Whiteville, North Carolina is like 110 miles from Charlotte. And just went into the small bank, and I had my business plan. It was about half of I still got that, by the way, about half of a legal page written down. You know, I'd already gotten some commitments, you know, to fly from different freight forwarders, from Federal Express and Airborne and so on, you know. And I presented that to him, you know, and he said, okay. And I found an airplane, $23,000 Cherokee 6, down in Hilton Head. And you know, he said, okay, well, what are you going to do? He said, how much are you going to put down on it? I'd rather not put anything down. And he went, you know, you seem like an honest boy. He said, okay. He loaned me every penny. I paid him back every penny with interest. But then, you know, the Army gave me so much. And it was primarily accomplished. Accomplished the mission. And so, you know, I got that thing started. It was a one-man operation. You know, I had air bills printed up, and I'm going, hell, I'm running this thing off 2 credit cards and an SO card back then, not ECHO, and a golf cart. Well, pretty soon both of them went, you're using this commercially. you know, and cut me off. I'm going, oh no, you know. But I found this little old gal that came in on Tuesday to get the billing. You know, and she knew how to do the billing and send the billing in, so I started getting checks in and started paying off. Then these, you know, we did the job, and somebody said, well, can you go to Asheville, North Carolina for us? And I'm like, yeah. So I went, shit. So I went out and found an airplane, rented an airplane, and hired this guy, and, you know, built it into the number 3 135 operation in the country. You know, with 16 airplanes and 1 helicopter. And sold it at 10 years. And the North Carolina National Guard was the first reserve unit to get Apaches. And so I signed up for them and went through a year's training with the Apache Training Brigade at Fort Hood. It was the Apache, you thought it so much different than anything else that you had to relearn everything, basically. And so, and eventually that proved wrong, but that's what they thought at the time. And so went through that.
So what happens to your business while you're doing the year's training?
Oh, I sold it.
Okay.
I sold it to these idiots. 3 Harvard Law School graduates, a man and a wife, and this other guy, and then had all 3 been through the University of Pennsylvania, a business school, Boston Business School, and they didn't know that you had to take in more money than you spent.
Oh,
They were absolute bankrupt. The thing, they had something like 11 companies. They bankrupted them all in a year's time. But anyway, went through Apache Training Brigade. Did real well there. I'd been stationed at Fort Hood twice at that time. I told all the guys, I said, you know about Hippie Hollow down at Lake Travis? And they said, what's that? I said, it's a nude beach. You know, and I said, it's run by Travis County. It's a government beach, but it's a nude beach. I said, we'll go down there if we pass. You know, and they went, a government-owned nude beach? No, that's not right. Well, we passed, and I got 5 15-passenger GSA vans, loaded it up with beer and Apache pilots, and went to the nude beach. Oh, if they'd have found out, you know, you'd have been talking to ex-Leavenworth occupant Yearwood at this point. But anyway, did that, got through there, then came back to Texas. This guy, Tim Hines, I was talking to you about, he was executive officer of the aviation brigade. You know, and I called him, I said, I'm coming back. He said, God, we're we got too many dead captains. You know, I'll do something, you know. It's not who you know, but I guess. But anyway, he got me in, and then, you know, that went all right. I was real frustrated with the non-Army attitude of the Guard, but.
Yeah. Right. So now what year was that when you're
Moved back in 88.
Okay. All right. And then how long do you stay with the Guard?
Till 97.
Okay. And what rank do you finish at?
Lieutenant Colonel. I ended up commanding in the Texas Apache Battalion.
Okay. Are there particular parts of that job, or stories that come out of that stand out for you?
Well, I had wanted I knew that the EXO, I had the job that my buddy got me was the airspace management officer for the 49th Armored Division, the Texas National Guard. Well, you know, there really wasn't a whole lot to do there, since the Third Corps commander controlled all the airspace. You know, I didn't have a whole lot to do, you know, and so I ended up being one of the assistant S3s, and I like writing op orders and things like that. That's what I did for the Apache Battalion in North Carolina. And so I wrote all the tactical operations orders and things like that there. And then the XO's slot came open in the cavalry squadron. And the cavalry squadron had 3 ground troops and 2 air troops, plus a maintenance troop. And, you know, spent a lot of time in the field and everything. And people were going, why do you want that? You know, I said, that's real soldiery. You know, that's not sitting up here in the damn, you know, our air-conditioned office all the time. Went there, had 2 good squadron commanders there. Pushed the envelope real hard there because they said, okay, well, you can only do 1 tank gunnery a year and one helicopter gunnery a year. You know, that's not enough. And it says in the helicopter gunnery, or in the air cavalry 1795 manual, you know, doing a gunnery a quarter should be your minimum. And so I had the S3 shop of the cavalry squadron just put in a 588, which is an ammunition request for more ammunition. Well, it gets to brigade, you know, it's just passed through. It gets to division, it's passed through. We get the thing. We did three tank gunneries in 1 year and 2 helicopter gunneries. And then division finally figures it out and starts hollering at the brigade commander, who was a Vietnam draft dodger, admitted the reason I got into the Guard was to avoid Vietnam. And so the squadron commander, you know, says, you go see Colonel Looney. You know, you go see him because this was your idea. And I went, okay, I'll go up there. And they had this one S1 major up there who I didn't like. He was just a rimp. Never wanted to go to the field. Always on the Fat Man program. I mean, he was not my kind of soldier. And so I walk in there and we did, you know, we spent a lot of time in the field. We did a lot of stuff. We did these jet attack team stuff, you know, shooting artillery, everything you got and all this stuff all the time. And Colonel Looney said, you know, you need to circle the wagon. He said, I've only got 3 months in command. I hadn't had an aircraft accident at all. He said, you need to stack arms. You need to circle the wagon. And I went, sir, that's an illegal order. He said, what? I just gave it to you. I said, no, sir, the Chief of Staff of the Army says training is the most important thing a unit can do. I said, I'm sticking with that. And he went, oh, John, you just don't get it. And then this fat ass says, you know, John, we were real happy to get you, but you've been a real disappointment since you got here. You know, and I'm going, shut up. What was his name? Shut up. Jack, whatever his name is. Ted. Shut up, Ted. I said, I've got to listen to my brigade commander. I don't have to listen to your overweight ass. You know? And so, I mean, you know, it deteriorated from there. But anyway, I got chosen to command the attack battalion. And we got an opportunity to go to JRTC, the Joint Training Center in Fort Polk. And trained hard for that. And the guy who was the lieutenant colonel who was the aviation evaluator wrote a book, you know, and so I read his book. I made troop commanders, the company commanders read his book and everything, and we did pretty well. And the 1st 509th Infantry were the aggressors, and they always overran all the aviation units, all the active duty, everything. Well, I manned everybody with an M16, and I manned all the scout observers with saws. Now we had to borrow them, but we had them, and we trained with them. We trained to dig foxholes and everything else. And we were the only aviation unit to go through JRTC that wasn't penetrated by the Op 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, you know, we learned a lot, and we actually, you know, the way things changed, we killed more people with the scouts than we did the Apaches, because the Op 4 wasn't expecting